board find that this is not a development of regional impact.
Oh, okay. Okay, I have a motion,
I'll make that motion, Mr. Chairman.
yeah, so that is with regional impact. Do I have a second?
Second?
Second by Jake. Motion by Al, second by Jake, there's no regional impact in regards to, I guess I got the address.
Free Enterprise Drive.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion by the board? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, say nay. Abstentions, and chair votes affirmative, and motion carries, and that is not a regional impact. So the second one?
So the second one is an application for a conditional use permit per Londonderry zoning ordinance, section 6.3.11C, and use table 4.1.2 to allow multifamily residential use in the Route 28 Performance Overlay District. This is at 215 and 217 Rockingham Road, map 15, lot 23-2. And map 15, lot 22-1, zoned commercial 2 and Route 28 Performance Overlay District. V&W Investment Group LLC is the owner and the applicant. Staff recommends the planning board find the project is not development of regional impact, as it does not meet any of the regional impact criteria as listed in the guidelines prepared by the Southern New Hampshire Regional Planning Commission.
You want to sit down on all of that, Johnny?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Do I have to go over
Yeah,
there?
yeah, you can, yeah, because people are probably watching, so. You get the exercise and we don't, you know?
Take a quick walk.
Is that the project down by Vista Ridge that we heard?
No, this is not the townhouse project, the Gene Gagnon project. No, this is a property on 28, further down the previously the had a restaurant and some other different uses in there, so it would be a redevelopment site.
Okay, let the record show that Gianni Barani has stepped down, and I'll point Ted to vote for Gianni, just on this one thing. So it's just a motion.
So looking for a motion.
I'll make a motion that this project doesn't meet the standards of regional impact.
Second?
By Al, second by Jake. Any discussion by the board? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay. Abstentions, chair is affirmative, and motion carries. And the record showed Gianni had stepped down for that, and he's returning back to the board. And you can relax again, Ted. Okay, next we have discussion with the town staff.
So I have a couple of items this evening. The first is a request for an extension for the deadline to meet the conditions of approval for a site plan. This is at 213 Rockingham Road. It was approved back in October. This was the conversion of what was previously a spa to the home medical office building. So they have requested an extension. They're close to wrapping up a few items, just have a few lingering things. So staff is recommending that the board grant an additional 120 days to comply with the conditions of approval. So that would bring us to June 3rd, 2022 is the new deadline to meet the conditions of approval.
Okay, take a motion for extension request for 120 days, which will take it to the 3rd of June of 2022.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, motion by Al,
Second?
second by Jake. Any discussion by the board on that? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed, say nay. And the chair votes affirmative. Seeing no abstentions, chair votes
I'm
affirmative.
going to abstain from it. They're a neighbor of the
Oh,
property I own.
Okay, let the record show that Gianni is abstaining on this. Yes, he is a.
So I don't know if you wanted me to step down.
No, no. There's nothing legally entangling with this that I can see, so. And chair votes affirmative, and motion carries, and that has an extension request to the 3rd of June of 2022.
So the only other item that I have for discussions with staff is just an update regarding the board will recall the last couple of meetings, Mr. Torelli, a property owner, has been in to speak to the board with his concerns on drainage from the Brayburn subdivision. So just by way of an update, the property owner is working with the third-party consultant to schedule a meeting to review. There are a few different scenarios that have been drafted solutions on how to address the water problem and the concern out there. So Mr. Trelli is currently working to schedule that meeting with a third-party consultant and include the town in that discussion. So that's where things are moving forward now, and I'm just giving you that as a brief update. And we'll let the board know if there's any other progress on that.
Oh, okay.
That big rain we had would have been a huge test to see how bad that runoff was going to be and where it was going to go.
Yeah, we could have, I think, for our first meeting in March 3rd, John can come in and just give us an update.
Yeah, I think that at that point, like I said, now that there have been some scenarios or some options designed, it's a matter of the property owner, having that discussion with Steve Keach, who's the third-party engineer who was brought on to review the initial analysis and have discussion on that. So I think that once the property owner has had a chance to have that conversation with Mr. Keach, they'll have some direction on what his preference is for moving forward.
It's hopefully headed for final resolution, so.
So that's all that I have.
Okay, anything, Jose?
Nothing for me, thank you.
Everything's good, huh? Good to hear. Anything from the board? No, seeing none. Let's see, Friday evening at 7 PM is the school district deliberative session, so please attend because this is where the majority of your tax dollars go. And we'll find more about the proposed construction of school offices. And the town deliberative was last Saturday, this past Saturday. It was very, at least from watching it on TV, not a big
69
crowd.
people.
How many?
69, and last year we had 72. That was during
69,
COVID.
So, whoops, the
It's
curve's going
pathetic.
down, unfortunately.
I know a lot of people got confused because the school board moved
Yes.
their meeting, and it's always school board,
School board is Friday night.
then the town, and I think a lot of
Saturday is
people
town.
got confused thinking was this Saturday instead of last Saturday.
School is, this coming Friday, so. Town is over, everything's wrapped up for the ballot, there's probably not a lot of discussion at all, so. Not like the
the old days.
town meetings. Okay, we'll move into our first part of the meeting, or actually, the second part is public hearing. And we're having a public hearing on proposed changes to the Londonderry zoning ordinance, section 5.15.1, portable storage structures in the AR1 district as it relates to establishing that the ZBA has the authority to regulate the length of time that such structures may be permitted by special exception. Also, there are corrections to section references, Scrivener's errors, and organizational updates. The full text of the amendment and changes are available at the Planning and Economic Development Department, the town clerk's office, and the Leach Library. And I'll
So,
have Colleen.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, I'll recommend that we handle these as two separate. So if we do first the discussion on portable storage and open the hearing, get input on that, make a recommendation on that, and then second, the Scrivener's errors typographical. That way, when I bring these to the town council, they can be two separate amendments and not tied together, just to keep things clean and make more paperwork for the council, I guess, is what we'll do. So the first is, Nick Codner was here last month and explained and had requested the board consider this language, and it prompted some additional discussion on other items and concerns relating to portable storage, but what we wanted to do was keep this focused on what Nick's initial discussion was. We'll continue to do some additional investigation regarding the other items that the board brought up relating to portable storage, but the amendment is proposed and written here is adding an additional bullet to the section 5.15.1 that clarifies that the applicant shall state what length of time the portable storage structure will remain on the property. The zoning board of adjustment may approve or limit the length of time a portable storage structure may remain on the property. So we just wanted to make it clear that when an applicant is requesting, they're going to put into their request for a special exception, do they want it for a year, do they want it for forever? And the ZBA will make its decision with consideration of that time frame. As we had discussed last month, I think that the authority is already there in the previous language that was approved, where the ZBA can impose additional conditions as necessary to protect the character of the neighborhood. But Nick Codner's concern was just making sure that the ZBA, it was clear that they understood they had that authority. So I'm happy to answer any questions the board may have or take any input from the public.
Okay, I'll go through the board anyway, and then I'll go to the public. Ted,
No real concerns at this time.
Deb,
No, I think this is a good change by putting these parameters on there.
Jeff,
I agree.
I'm all set.
I agree.
Johnny,
I'm also,
No concerns.
Roger.
Good to go.
I'm good.
And, Jake. Okay, anyone from the public have any questions, comments, and concerns in regards to the proposed change in regards to, portable storage structures?
Good evening, Mark Fortin, 574 Mammoth Road, Londonderry. How is everyone today?
Good.
Excellent.
How about
So,
you?
I'm wonderful, thank you for asking.
I like that hat.
Thank you again. That's 2 yays to that tonight alone. So, we're good. My only concern, or I guess I just want to make sure that everyone, that obviously you are aware, I've attended some of these ZBA meetings, and the ZBA seems to be on the time limit thing or not. One of the reasons that we went through all of this for a year and a half, Colleen,
Oh, yes.
it was a process, was that properties that can put these things, if that's what they want for their storage, to store their stuff, whatever it may be, if they can place them in such a manner so they're not, they're set back from the road, they're not affecting the neighbor. All of the neighbors get notifications, which I think is wonderful. And they've got to prove why they want to put it where they want to put it, and make sure they don't destroy the character of the neighborhood. The ZBA is already aware of that they can limit the time. I just think it's redundant. How's that?
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else? I don't see anyone else, and I'll bring it back to the board. It's up to the board to make a recommendation to the town council. Town council will either approve or not approve of this. Yes, I need a vote, for the, to recommend to the town council to adopt the proposed changes.
So move.
Okay, I have a motion,
Second.
and Roger had his hand up, so.
Second.
Motion is made and seconded. Is there any discussion by the board? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. Abstentions, and chair votes affirmative. And the proposed changes will move on to the town council. Town council will have 2 readings of it. The first reading is an introduction, and the second reading is a public hearing. That will be at some point in the future town council agenda. Okay, now the Scrivener's errors and organizational updates and section references.
So, Mr. Chair, members of the board, as you know, was it 2 years ago, we did our zoning overhaul and had reorganized. And of course, we found over the past, 2 years in working with the updated reorganized ordinance, there are some sections where table numbers or section references it did not get updated and should have been. So basically, that is what this is correcting, is eliminating or fixing those section references that were off. The only other item that I would point out is that under the multifamily R3 district, when the board recently made its change eliminating elderly housing, there was a provision that was still remaining in this R3 that restricted, that allowed in the R3 district for single-family and two-family dwellings to be allowed per the use table, provided 75% of those units be restricted for older persons. That's something that should have been struck when we did the elderly housing elimination, so we're proposing to strike that now to clean this up and make this consistent with the previous amendment we did on elderly housing. So again, it was a housekeeping issue that was not caught when we did the elderly housing amendment. So as you flip through, it might, I'm not sure if your colors, I know I sent out the PDF in color, you could easily see the red line, and that's what was posted on the website. So if anyone has any questions or comments about any of the red lines, please let me know, but otherwise, entertain questions from the board or from the public.
Okay, the board have any questions? Everyone on the board all set? Mm-hmm. Okay, anyone from the public have any questions, comments, and concerns with these corrections? These are little, what's called Scrivener's errors, is either misspellings or awkward, words. Organizational updates, this is with the indexing, making sure the references are accurate.
Colleen,
Yes.
on that 4.2.2.2 users B,
Yep.
it says per the table, per use table, shouldn't it note where the table is?
Yep, we can do that.
Which table it is?
Yep, we can do that.
they're referring to?
And it will be table 4.1, so we can update that. Thank you.
Yes. Seeing no further discussion, I'll take a motion that we also make a recommendation to the town council of the correction of these section references, Scrivener's errors, and organizational updates.
So move, Mr. Chairman, with the inclusion of Deb's correction.
Yes, Deb's correction is in there. Roger seconds. You get that hand right up there, Roger.
Hey, I only get a chance to vote occasionally, you know? Gotta make the best of it.
Okay, motion by Al, second by Roger. Any further discussion by the board? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Abstentions, and chair votes affirmative, and motion carries. That will be sent to the town council also. That goes through the same process as the portable storage structures. Okay, next, we got into other business here. We have a discussion on poultry and groundwater protection, and commercial kennels and signage are going to be updates only because there's a lot more work that needs to be done on that. We'll go to poultry first.
Sure. So the board has language I revised from what you saw last month, taking some of the input and the concerns that were raised. And I believe that with some discussion tonight, we might make a couple other some minor amendments. One of the items in just restructuring this slightly was I did receive some input from agricultural users in town that currently have agricultural operations and wanting to make sure that on properties larger than 2 acres that currently had an operation, we weren't changing anything to impact those folks. So, so I did separate this and reorganize it so that it is now clear that if you're an existing property larger than 2 acres, then you're continuing, and you can still have roosters. You can still have these new restrictions don't apply to those larger properties. So, so that was a very good catch, and that's why we have public meetings and public input to be able to make sure that we address those concerns. So the language now and would allow for on lots smaller than 2 acres, the keeping of poultry. This is an item I'd like to discuss if we'd like to change the word poultry to just chickens, so that we're only allowing chickens on lots smaller than 2 acres. If you want ducks or turkeys or other poultry, you need more than 2 acres. So I'd like some input from the board on that. I use language, and different communities have done things differently. One thing that seems to work and was a recommendation from our code enforcement was requiring that the chickens be properly enclosed at all times. There be fencing adequate to prevent escaping from trespassing on public or private property. We did receive some some public input via email that was included in your packet, expressing a concern about poultry or chickens trespassing on abutters' properties, and if there would be a concern on that. So this language being built in there just allows it so that code enforcement has some teeth. If there's a nuisance chicken that's causing a problem, then code enforcement can, remind folks that chickens are allowed, but they need to stay on your own property. So we did not set a number of chickens per acre, or I know there's some discussion on that. It seems that there's not a real best management practice recommendation on how many chickens are appropriate on a 1 acre lot or half acre lot. So what we did was go with the needing to provide the 3 square feet of sheltered coop, 10 square feet of enclosed outdoor run, which that is from the state's best management practices on agriculture. So we included that in there. And then by requiring setbacks from a property line for those enclosures, that in itself is going to be what restricts how many chickens are reasonably used on the property. So I'd look for some input from the board on changing the word poultry to chickens so that we're only talking chickens here, not turkeys and ducks and geese. And if the board has any other thoughts or comments, but otherwise, I think staff are comfortable with this, the code enforcement's comfortable with this, and going ahead to a public hearing with this for next month is what we would recommend.
Are there any towns or municipalities that limit the number of, like chickens
So there
to a certain
are,
size?
Goffstown limits and has a set number that I think is like 12 chickens. I think Wyndham sets a designated number that I think is much lower than that. Derry, this language is similar to Derry, where it's not limiting the number, but is, setting it based on some actual criteria. The challenge is really, what is the right number? So we could add a number and say you're limited to a dozen birds on a property or coming up with something, but I don't know. I don't know that I can give you that there's a science behind what that right number is. So I didn't want to propose something without knowing what's right.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of looking for. What's behind it for?
Yeah,
Does it support?
It seems without having, and I did not have conversations with the planners in those other communities, but it seems that it was what feels like the right number is kind of how those communities adopted numbers rather than a set criteria.
Okay, I'll go through the board. I'll start with Ted again, so.
So I guess I'll go back to the comment about number of chickens. At least on that front for code enforcement. Say if people are letting them go free ranging, which are upsetting a lot of neighbors in the areas. And, if the neighbors are saying, I got so many number of them on my property and, take pictures or whatever it is, they're able to report that back to the code enforcement person. And, say, for example, if they're only allowed, say, 10 chickens, and if they got all 10 of them on their property, or if they got 5 of them, they're able to actually put a number to it and, patrol it, police it better that way.
Yeah, I think that from an
Or
enforcement
if all of a sudden they
perspective,
got, 20 chickens and, you're only supposed to have 10.
yeah, I think from an enforcement perspective, counting chickens is going to be I think it's easier to know that if they're free ranging and they're roaming on someone else's lot, that's not allowed. It doesn't matter if it's 1 or if it's 20. If it's not contained on your property, it's a violation, and so we can enforce on that. I think that's a little bit easier than, I don't know a lot about chickens. I don't have chickens, but if you buy, a dozen chicks and then, somebody, gives you 2 more, or do we have Norma out there counting people's chickens? That's a bit more challenging, whereas I think the nuisance factor is more of the concern.
I guess my second question is, have we been getting a lot of calls in about free-ranging chickens being a nuisance?
No, not that I'm aware of, because right now they're not permitted on lots less than 2 acres. And so my guess is that right now the chickens are fairly contained, or on lots that are, of a significant size that they're not roaming. But I'm not aware of an influx of chicken complaints. I am aware of a number of people who have called and want to be able to have chickens and have had a concern that they're not able to.
Sounds good, thank you.
Okay, Deb,
So here's my concern, right? So Ted lives next to me, he has under an acre, he has chickens. I live next to him, I've got 2+ acres and I've got chickens. I can free roam. How are you gonna prove that those chickens going on Jeff's land, who lives on the other side of us, is from me and not Ted or what. This is, I'm just
Yeah.
pointing this out.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that they're gonna be in a row like that, but, so I do have chickens, I do have 2.5 acres. I let them wander around. They usually don't go very far. They're very afraid. They stay within a thinged area, which is fine. And the other word that, I do like the changing of poultry.
Poultry to chicken.
Because what I found out is there's a lot more to taking care of ducks
Yep.
and turkeys. There's a lot more to it. They need bigger space and there can be
Yeah,
more.
bigger birds.
And, well, and the ducks can fly, so you have to have a whole there's just a lot more to it than there is with the little chicken. So I do like the idea that if we change it to chickens specifically,
Okay.
and then if they want ducks, they could go like now to the
Go to
ZBA
ZBA
and,
for variance.
and ask, unless they've got over 2 acres, then they can. So that was it. And there was something about the fencing. All fencing shall be adequate. So to me, the number one and the, when you're talking about the 3-square shelter, you're really speaking of a coop.
Yeah.
Because even if I put fences, chickens can fly. They go up inside the trees and stuff. So, I mean, when you're going to talk about putting in an 8-foot plus fence. So, to me, you want to get rid of that and say, if you have it under 2 acres, you know, if you're going to say you're not going to allow free ranging, right? Then you should say should be in a coop of blah, blah, 3 by whatever you want to say, at least, or minimal, or
Minimum of,
whatever.
3 square feet.
You know what I mean? Like, there should, that could be a minimal, but,
Yeah, I think that what this was trying to, was coop being enclosed space, but then there may also be if
A
you're
run, I know what
choosing
a
to have your
run,
run
yeah.
and your fence.
yeah,
so-
yeah.
So that's the,
So I do both, but I'm just saying, that to me is part of the coop,
yep.
or say, and run, coop
Okay,
and
coop
run.
and run.
Because the word fence, to me, is a fence, you know, and that means that they can get over it really very easily. They do go up in the air pretty high, you'd be surprised.
Especially when they're alarmed.
Yes.
You get a coyote stalking them, they
Yeah, you'd
fly.
be surprised, yeah, you would all be, how quick they jump up in a tree.
So I think that, to your point, that, so in item 1, if the wording was changed to all chickens shall be properly enclosed at all times, the enclosure shall be adequate to prevent, escaping trespassing. That's then, we're talking about enclosure, not specifically fencing. And then, and I believe that as written, number 2, a minimum of 3 square feet of sheltered coop and 10 square feet of enclosed outdoor run shall be provided. So it's asking for your indoor coop and your run.
Right,
both
and,
being,
and
so-
I don't know if this is legal, I mean, to say or put in an ordinance, but again, I don't see anything wrong with free reining them because they don't go anywhere. And like I said, how can you tell where they're coming? I mean, if that's the only person on the street and they're getting complaints, well, that's a horse of a different color and you
Yeah.
could say it, or, I mean, I don't know.
So Norma,
Free range chickens are good because
yeah.
they eat all your bugs, the ticks especially.
Norma, from a code enforcement perspective, did recommend and request that there be the restriction on the chickens not be allowed to range onto.
Okay.
So I think that, being that she's the one who's tasked with enforcing it, if, I guess she's opening herself up to the idea that that position is going to be responsible for figuring out if they're Ted's chickens or Deb's chickens, and then answering Jeff's complaint based on
I'm
whose
just-
chicken is whose.
You just
But
don't know.
It is a good point, and yeah, I think, it'll end up being a case-by-case basis on enforcement issues.
So the other thing too is back to number 2, the minimum size.
Yep.
We should say suggested size, because if I'm on an even smaller lot, I may even go smaller than that. I might just have like 2 to 3 chickens, right? And I would just need a very small 2x2 in-house and a bigger runner. Because in the house, they cuddle
I thought it
together.
was per
Yeah,
chicken.
it's per
Oh, it's
chicken,
per, but it says
chicken.
minimum is what I'm saying.
Yeah, a minimum of 3 square feet per chicken, so.
So if you,
Outside and 1 square feet inside, or both?
Maybe I
10
don't understand
it's-
the
10 square feet
sizes is
outside, yeah.
what it looks like in my head.
Well, Deb, 2 by 2 would be 4 square feet, so 3 square feet's smaller than what you're
Yeah.
trying to say.
So how big would that be, like,
Two by
so?
one.
2 by 1 or,
One
yeah,
by
2 by
two.
1.
2 by 1.5.
Yeah, 1.5.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's not a big.
I was just
big
thinking
area.
about people in
Yeah.
a smaller space. I
Yeah.
thought that was bigger than,
No,
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 no.
3 square feet's not a lot.
you can tell I'm a girl, right? And I don't do construction.
Yeah, 'cause I
measuring
think
tape
the,
out here
the
and
numbers are,
dimension
you know,
the area.
what I found, you know, for poultry raising and everything, those are probably the most common.
3 square feet.
Yeah,
Spatial,
yeah, you're right.
setup.
That's actually a good way of putting it.
So I don't know if we have to wait our turn, but, you know, there is actually, and you could probably go to the University of New Hampshire Co-op. There is suggested guidelines as to if you have
Yeah,
20 chickens, you need so many square feet of roosting area, so many laying boxes, so many of this. So it's, I think if you dig a little bit, you could get to some sort of language that says per responsible chicken,
yeah.
you
That-
know,
That's where
guidelines.
these numbers came from, the
Best
State
practice.
Department of Agriculture's best management practices. So we included the numbers in here rather than, originally, we were referencing and saying, you know, please refer to the Department of Agriculture's best management practices, you have to comply with all that. But when it boils down to it, nobody's gonna go and look and review that, so that's why we inserted the numbers in here from that. Now, this was just
So if you
the
have
stated
10
number.
chickens, you have 30 square feet and, yeah.
Exactly, and it doesn't, so
'Cause
that's
there
the
is a
thing.
science behind it,
Yeah, that's the
actually,
thing,
you
is
know,
that
so-
best
They
management
don't-
practice didn't have, it didn't float, which is what you would expect, like, okay, so for 10 chickens, you need this much, and for 20, you need that much, and that it would vary, you know, that wasn't in there, but, you know, I'm sure we could find other places if we wanted to get more into it. This seemed like this was supported by, you know, state recommendation, and so went with this, but happy to, you know, look at different changes if folks want to.
So I think that's all the comments I had, and thank you for taking Kit Plummer's suggestion.
Yes, yeah, it was a good,
He
it was a
called
good
me
phone
up and
call,
he
yep.
was like very excited
Yeah.
about this happening because I guess Londonderry was like really big on people having chickens, like years ago. Like almost every other house had chickens, is what he was explaining to me. And that Merrill's Farms raised the chickens for Campbell's soup. So it was like a really big thing here. And so it's kind of nice that
There's
it's
a lot of
coming
history
back
to-
and
yep.
people are able to do it
In the
again.
30s and the 40s, there was a lot of chicken farming, so, I mean, New England anyway. I don't know
Yeah.
about the rest of the country.
It was
but-
interesting. He gave me a whole history. But he was very concerned about these rules applying to people with over 2 acres. All right, I'm good.
All set? Jeff?
Colleen, just to clarify, if, you know, if we're all in agreement to remove poultry and chickens,
Yep.
you would just strike out any word that says poultry, replace it with chickens?
Yes, so on the first line of B, where it says poultry would be replaced with chickens, and then I think, and then in item 1, there are 2 places where the word poultry is used, that would be replaced with chickens as well.
Okay. And
Oh, and in item 3, keeping of chickens.
in B4, there shall be no roosters permitted, would you also include ducks and other, or non-chickens, or is it?
I think
don't
if
know,
we're
I don't
saying that
wanna get,
only
like-
chickens are permitted, then we don't need to
Yeah.
necessarily, you know,
I'm not
state the
in
others.
favor of that.
Yeah.
Of-
I think that,
Gotta have a
no, I
rooster.
think that, you know, I mean, I raised chickens, I've raised turkeys. Turkeys are probably the nicest,
Yeah.
I mean, creatures out there. Ducks, geese, I don't know, but, you know, I think if you're gonna get to that point and somebody can manage it properly
Yeah, absolutely.
and follow the guidelines and, you know, I don't see, because now you're saying that, what, you're discriminating against chickens versus turkeys versus ducks versus
Well,
geese?
I was
can
just
do-
talking about
you can
the-
do it if you have
the
2
language,
acres or
how it
more.
would,
I know,
how the
but I'm
language
just
would-
saying, if we're gonna go all this way to allow
Baby
somebody to
steps.
have a chicken, why not allow them to have a turkey or a goose or,
I totally agree.
you know?
I totally agree.
Now you
I don't
need
know,
to
I mean,
really be
So
turkeys,
depending
I
on
don't
what
have them,
the,
but they
you know,
like-
what we
they like
kind of
to roast
decide,
them.
you'll keep
Different
that.
dimensions for
Yeah, I mean,
turkey,
yeah,
it's
same.
bigger,
Got
it
it.
likes more
Depending on what we
space.
get to, yeah.
Couple of, I thought we were going in order, but obviously not.
I mean, I still have a few different questions to get through.
Jeff still
Let me
has
talk, but
questions.
We'll still go in order, so you'll have another chance, Roger.
I haven't had a chance yet.
Oh, we're really,
Okay.
really with
We're
Jeff
on
so
Jeff.
far, so,
And really quickly, just previously, I think we had a discussion about free language of free ranging. Does it hurt to put no free ranging across property lines, just for clarity? Or is that just too?
Nope, we can do that.
Right. Now we can debate hens and geese and ducks.
Why don't we go through like
we'll go
other
through the board.
comments, and then we'll ask for who's okay with chickens, who's okay with poultry, and we'll do a straw
who
poll.
favors what fowl, you know?
Well, you could make it all separate. Here's your rules for chickens, here's your rules for turkeys, here's your rules for ducks, here's your rules for
Oh, boy.
those nasty geese.
What about pheasants?
Geese are nasty.
Cornish game hens.
Actually, we have a guy in Londonderry that raises pheasants, right? in the
Okay,
backyard.
you all set, Jeff?
Yes.
More than two acres.
Okay, Lynn. So, Lynn's got the floor right now.
Sorry, Lynn. Sorry about that.
So I'm going to go on record saying I think we should change poultry to chickens. You know, we talk about no roosters being permitted. Roosters are, they're noisy, they're just kind of a nuisance. And I think if we had geese is the same problem. Somebody gets a peacock, you know, we'll be in big trouble if that happens. So I really think that the intent of that is just to keep the noise to a minimum, and I think the best way to do that is to keep the ordinance to chickens specifically. And then we talked about density a while back, and I look at number 2 as really limiting the density of the chickens on a piece of property as well. You know, 10 square feet per chicken, so if you want to turn your half-acre lot into one big chicken run, I guess you could do that, but you're still going to have 500 chickens at the most, right? But nowhere to live. So I think that particular paragraph limits the density just fine. The only question I have goes back to the run and having it fenced in. And, you know, I think we need to make a statement that we're expecting the top to be covered if,
You'd want the top covered, otherwise a hawk or owl
but,
or
you know.
anything that
just
can
to
jump
have-
in will get them and eat them.
The other
just to have an
four-legged creatures
enclosure.
can get up and over, or under even.
Make clear that the enclosure in item 1 is
prevent-
fully enclosed.
Fully enclosed, fully enclosed. But, yeah, those are my 2 comments. Thank you.
Al?
I just have a couple of things. I'm assuming that someone couldn't make this a commercial thing, selling chickens, eggs, slaughtering and selling, and
Yeah, I mean, as a home occupation, certainly, it's, I mean, an agricultural use.
I guess at what point does it become a commercial business?
I mean, at some point, so as long as it meets the criteria of our home occupation, so our separate criteria where you can have a home occupation if, you know, there are no other outside employees, or there are some home occupations that require a special exception if you're having different traffic. So presumably you could have a home occupation that is, you know, raising livestock or raising poultry or chickens.
Okay, my second thing is on section C. My own opinion is after sight, sound, smell, I would put vermin. And those are the only 2 things.
Okay, Johnny?
Well, I appreciate the fact that you called it out specifically to lots less than 2 acres, so you're not impacting anybody that does it, you know, as a profession that has an agricultural use. So I appreciate that. Sounds like you followed the, you know, any type of responsible guideline with regards to size. And I don't have a dog in this fight, but I definitely have a duck, a turkey, and a goose in this fight. And I really think that if we're going this far to accommodate this for lots under 2 acres, they're either gonna do it responsibly or they're not gonna do it responsibly. And the people that aren't doing it responsibly will probably be the ones reported. But I think all of those other species should be included, so.
Jason?
I don't have even a chicken, a duck, or a rooster in this fight, but I think that we should change poultry to chicken. Just to, there's gonna be that person out there that decides to put a couple turkeys on half, one of those houses that they built over by, on Pillsbury Road. And, if we don't have something in there, then. So that's it.
Okay, Roger?
Oh, thank you.
I have raised chickens, ducks, and rabbits on my property, which is 1 acre. I would be interested in somebody explaining to me why, if I have 3 or 4 turkeys, which you start in very early spring, and grow them up and chop off their heads in November, what's the difference between that and the 24 to 30 turkeys I get coming through my yard wild? And why are you discriminating against me? And that's exactly the way I feel. And the second thing is, 12 chickens really, especially during the wintertime, they don't lay that much, and they're good for a couple of years. And that's, I would like to be able to have 12 chickens and 3 or 4 turkeys that I'm raising up to chop. And again, you can say, oh, we don't want turkeys, but we got them anyways. I got pictures of my yard being picked clean of bugs. So I figured if I had 3 of my own, I'd put up a collar on them and let them go around the yard. But-
Go out and trap them, Roger, trap them, early November.
Too much work. It's easier. I'll tell you, there used to be somebody with turkeys right on Mammoth Road here that raised them, and you could see in their yard. But that's got to be 30 years ago. But anyways, I'm opposed to changing that to chickens only. I think chickens and turkeys are, ducks stay in your yard even if the wings aren't clipped if you feed them. The problem with ducks is the dogs come after them more than the chickens. That's what happened.
And the ducks like water, so.
Well, we have a big pool. I think,
Swimming with the ducks?
we had ducks that stopped in our pool on the flight from the south to the north and on the way back. I have pictures of them too. But anyways, I'm really interested now in raising a few turkeys and raising chickens. And I use a movable shed for the chickens.
Wasn't a portable storage structure, was it?
I declined to answer that on the Fifth Amendment. No, it's just a place that I built on wheels. And though I could move it around the yard, and the chickens eat everything right down to the ground and fertilize it, and then you move it along. And I would probably do that again. I'd probably use a little bit bigger, but anyways. And you have a roll-up fence. Fence is easy, 4 poles. So I never really had too many troubles. Only the dogs next door got at the ducks. But other than that, so yes, it's you buy chicken wire, buy a roll, you roll it on the top. When you want to move the coop, just chase them all in the coop, close the door, move it along, put your stakes back in the ground, and that's what I did. I don't know if I'd be that vicious or that enterprising now, but I would still, I want turkeys. I can't see why you can say I can't have them and then wild ones come in.
Okay,
And I think that's a good point.
Jake?
So maybe can we come up with a compromise? Chicken, ducks, and turkeys are okay, but a pheasant would be a little odd, or a peacock, whatever you had suggested over there.
You don't want
I just, I think right now we're in a time especially where people are very interested in growing their own vegetables. They want to have chickens. They want to try and be a little more self-sustaining. And limiting it to just chickens might not necessarily be fair if you have somebody who's really trying to do that, you know, and they do want to have a turkey and raise a turkey to be able to consume it. So I think, you know, maybe a fair compromise could be chickens, ducks, and turkeys, where I would find them to be the more common. Some people really like duck eggs as opposed to chicken eggs, apparently.
much bigger.
Yeah, a lot bigger, you know? I do agree with a little bit more clarification on the top, having a top on the shelter like you were talking about. I agree making that a little bit, you know, you think fence, you don't think something on top, you think around. So I would definitely agree with that. I'm no expert in chickens, ducks, or turkeys, but I would say from a audible standpoint, they probably make just about the same amount of noise. Would I be wrong in saying that? You know, a turkey's not way louder than a chicken, is it?
Probably a
They're
little
all-
bit.
but they're
You get
relative.
a group of them, they'll, you know,
Yeah.
create a.
What are those really big things? Emus with the long necks and the two legs? You know, see, that's probably a little loud.
What's really loud, believe it or not, is a goose.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. They do
They're
make a
very
ton of
aggressive too.
Yeah.
They'll, you get hissed right
Vicious.
over.
Yeah, so would that be something we'd consider as a board? Could we do a little bit of a compromise and say chickens, ducks, and turkeys, which
think
are
we're,
really the more common things that people are gonna wanna grow and
We're
live off?
still in discussion mode, so, and this
Yeah.
is a, you know, legislation in development, so it's gonna.
Now, with turkeys, would we have to change that square?
Yeah, that's what I was just gonna say. That
'Cause
whole
that's
thing
gonna-
would have to be
Yeah.
adjusted.
If
Well,
I
that's
can-
a-
if
that's
I
a
can make-
minimum.
If I can make a comment,
Yeah.
Al's trying to speak.
okay? I know about best management practices, okay? For every one of these animals, you would have to go to UNH Extension and include the best management practices for every species.
That makes sense.
And that should answer your question
Yeah.
there. That might change coop size and everything, so.
I did want to comment, again, all summer long, 24 to 30 turkeys. And if it happens to be coming through late at night, they go up in the trees. They don't seem to make enough noise to get, you know, we have central air, so no windows are open. But I don't hear anything from them. And they're about 15, 20 feet from me on one of the big trees in the yard, so.
Yeah,
I don't think there's a noise pollution.
Well, the,
Mis-
Oh,
Oh, I was just gonna say, Mr. Chair, Roger, you can get your chickens, and if you did want the turkeys right now, you can go to the ZBA, and they could allow that for you.
Well, I don't want to, I don't think it's necessary.
No,
I
I'm
think
just
we
saying
should
right
put it in.
now, because to get the information for the, I don't know how long that's gonna take you to do each one of those.
I think my concern
Is
would
that is
be
what Al said is,
identifying the species then. What about guinea fowl? What about, you know, so I think,
yeah, I think we get into the exotic area, that is, you
Yeah.
know, let's leave it on the 2 acre,
yeah.
part.
I want to go
Ducks
back
can
to
be
what
quite
Roger said. What
But if we're-
about rat? No.
But if
Rabbits are
we're,
quiet.
My rabbits got out one year and went down the street and ate every flower on the street, and I paid barrels of money to put stuff back. There will be no rabbits at the Filio's house.
Well, Roger, they're not winged and feathered, so they're out of this.
The dogs like them, so.
like, so getting to
Jason.
your point about, you know, wild turkeys going through, wild turkeys don't stay on a property, obviously, because then they go. If you're talking about 3 turkeys in a half-acre property, they're there all day long, 24/7. So as somebody who has no desire to keep chickens, turkeys, whatever, but I'm thinking about as that neighbor, if there are 3 turkeys there all the time, what is the smell? What is the, you know, what is the sound?
Actually, like I said, it is no more different than the turkeys that come through every single day.
Right, but
We're not-
but those move on, whereas these would stay as your neighbors.
Are you trying to compare chicken feces to turkey feces? I would think it's all gonna smell the same.
I don't want to smell any of it, to be honest with you.
Well, and again, the only complaint I ever had was when the rabbits got out. And I had them for several years, but then I didn't. But now I want to. I will enjoy doing that.
So I think if I can get then a sense of, if, even if it's by a show of hands, if there are folks who want to keep this still to just chickens, folks who want to open this up to all poultry, or folks that are happy with a compromise that's, you know, chickens, ducks, and turkeys, but I will do some additional research and change the best management practices for areas for each of those species. So,
Yeah, the way this is written is just for chickens
Yeah.
anyway.
so,
And when you do that, you should, you know how we say roosters?
Yep.
You'd have to use the word like Tom or whatever, because people will say, well, it didn't say I couldn't have Toms. You know,
Well,
I mean, people are funny like that. They're always
I know
looking.
that on the chickens, there's the roosters and the crowing and the noise. I do
Oh,
not know.
yes.
Do turkeys,
They
do
get
male
male
turkeys
turkeys
crow louder than female turkeys? Is
They
that-
gobble and they get
loudly.
aggressive
Okay.
with
The
females.
gobbling
Nothing would
you
make
can,
me happier than hearing a gobble outside.
What?
How do you let that? Have you listened to the noise of the traffic that goes by your house every day? What's a little gobble? Come on.
Well, they do get aggressive too.
So, okay, show of hands, who would like to keep this just chickens? 1, 2, 3.
Oh, I
Four.
can't, I'm an alternate, so I can't.
Okay, so
Well, this
4,
is
that's,
just,
we got
oh,
8 of us, so. And then who would like to keep it for chickens, turkeys?
And ducks.
And ducks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's our answer.
Okay.
And this
I-
is excluding roosters, right? No roosters.
Yep, we're still.
Yeah, there's no
roosters.
roosters in here.
Nobody in their right mind.
Except one
gets
at your neighbor's house,
Well,
Ted.
I got a neighbor.
Okay.
If I get a rooster, which occasionally happens, I'll bring it right over to your house.
We got friends who, you know, had their new chicks, and once they got bigger, one of them started crowing, and then, this is in Wyndham, and the animal control officer came by and says, you gotta get rid of it.
Good to know.
Mr. Chair.
Yes,
Colleen, is there an opportunity to, you know, when this goes into effect, just maybe update the Londonderry website about, you know, just resources for people that want to own chickens and, you know, first-time chicken owners and,
Yeah, absolutely. We could
And stuff
do,
just to
do
kind of-
something and, you know,
Maybe-
point them in the right direction
Yeah.
of,
Yeah,
you
maybe-
know, some guides for,
right, exactly. It doesn't have to be something that we develop, but something that we.
yeah, just point them to cooperative extension or other best management practices. Yep, it's a good idea.
okay.
Okay, so
Anything-
I'll-
Anything else?
Nope,
on
with
this?
that guidance, I'll, work on some more language and figure out, what a female turkey versus a male turkey is called, so we
And
get
then
our correct nomenclature.
The male duck.
Tom is,
Well,
Tom is
so-
a,
I know duck, we've got a
Well,
mallard versus,
Is that the actual
so
name?
we'll-
Tom and a hand, yeah.
I was just hoping we
Jake
could
for a
get
young
this
one.
done by spring so people could actually
so
get
people
going.
can
and
start
What was
making
that,
their
Al?
checks.
Jake is a young male turkey.
I will say though, because I raise turkeys every year, and it's gonna be very difficult to find a provider that will only give you female turkeys. It's almost impossible to find somebody that will do that. So, and I will disagree, it's not like my experience has been, they're not like the wild turkeys, that they gobble and they strut and do all this other sort of thing. It's usually a pick, 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 you know, that's all you ever hear is a little pip. So when you're doing the research, you might want to take that into consideration, because I don't know that anybody's gonna want to spend $7 on a pullet and then have to then decide whether or not they're gonna have to filter out half of their acquisition.
So going back to what I originally said, maybe we should break it down into 3 things, because they have 3 distinctive issues. You know what I mean? Like, if you're saying that the toms are okay with the turkeys, so if we did it separately, at least we could say, you know,
I think that's her plan.
That's my plan, that's what I'm envisioning is, and then, and
E-
so
e-
I'll,
Each will be treated separately. and
yeah,
for their
because I
own
think if you try to
specific,
clump it all together,
characteristics.
it's gonna
Yep.
get confusing.
and I'll see if there is literature on whether or not we should be concerned about male turkeys or not, or male geese versus female. it'll be a learning
Well,
process.
it seems they just like to strut their stuff.
And hopefully we can get it done by spring so people
Yes.
can get going.
I will plan to bring updated language back to you for the first March meeting, so that way we can get a public hearing for April and get things. But I do want to let you have eyes on language again before we post it for a public hearing. So I will come back with that for March and
Thank you.
go from there.
I did want to make one comment. There's a couple of local places, and I'm not advertising for anybody. But if you want to buy turkeys, you can go to Tractor Supply, and they have very informative people there that'll tell you all you need to know. And you can buy, these are turkeys that are grown to be grown up in 3 or 4 months and axed. They're not wild turkeys. They are made to pack on protein.
Just fatten them up.
And right in Derry, the grain and feed place sells them, and that's turkeys. But they sell everything there, and they have a lot of literature on it. But it's 90% common sense.
Are there rabbits there too?
If you want them. I actually have never seen anybody with ducks, but they do have, an online thing. But all of the breeders will tell you what you're getting.
Okay, we're going to move on to our next discussion, and that is with groundwater protection. And we have an ordinance that pretty much mirrors what the state's DES's suggestions. So Colleen,
Yep, and so my apologies, because we have the map, we tried to fix the map. I had some formatting issues when this converted to a PDF, and Amy fixed it, and then I apparently still broke it again. So there are some symbol things that look kind of funky in the PDF and in the paper you have in front of you that will be fixed before the map gets published. But I wanted you to at least be able to get eyes on, this is the area in yellow that would be regulated based on our last discussion. The language we have here, I'm pretty comfortable with. We are going to continue, so Jose and John Trottier and I are going to do another review through this. We do have some, we've identified just the organizational concern of, and I think John and Jose both kind of flagged it and said, well, you have to go 3 pages in before you get to what are the permitted uses, prohibited uses, and conditional uses in the zone. So we are going to just reorganize to make this a little bit more logical, so that you're knowing what you're prohibited from doing before we start telling you what the performance standards are for what you're doing. So, the board's had this for a month, and I know we had this earlier in the summer and had a presentation from DES. So I'm just looking if you have any questions or concerns, or if anything about the map, aside from me having issues with symbols in my PDF conversion, if there are any questions or concerns you have before we, do some final tweaks, clean this up, and post this for a public hearing for next month.
that's usually where the state does everything, is the definitions are always first. You look at the statutes, you
Yeah.
always see the definitions first.
Yeah,
You
and
gotta read into it to really get to the
And I
meat
think
of the matter.
we'll keep the definitions first, we'll keep, the definition of the groundwater protection district first, but then instead of going to performance standards, which is just a page and a half of performance standards, I think we just need to get and, make it clear what the permitted and prohibited uses are before we start telling people what the standards are for them. So just a little bit of reorganization, but nothing significant. And then just reviewing with Jose and John and double checking against our stormwater ordinance to make sure that everything is consistent there as well.
Okay, what I'll do, I'll start the other end. Jake, you can start the proceedings off here for,
I am all set at the moment, sir.
okay. Roger?
Me too.
Yeah, wow.
All set, thank you.
Yeah, okay.
I just have a question. The areas that are affected are the yellow areas?
Yep.
Okay. So the areas that are affected that are in yellow, and there's already like gas stations and things in existence, what happens?
They're pre-existing, so they're not subject to this regulation.
So if they get to a point where, I'm in agreement with the ordinance, and
Yeah.
I appreciate the ordinance, and I like it, but do they get to a point where maybe they have to use an add use or change, or they have to come back in and resubmit and everything else? Is it?
So if the use is already pre-existing, so I guess what could open up if you had a gas station that that currently has, you know, a certain amount of petroleum storage or a certain amount, if they were to expand that use, then to me, that's something that's an expansion or a change that now is subject to review under this ordinance. But if you have a gas station that's continuing to operate as a gas station, you know, if you make other changes on the property that don't change the what's regulated under this ordinance, it doesn't trigger this ordinance or this review. So, so if you have a gas station and convenience store and you add an extra, you know, 2,000 square feet of convenience store onto your gas station, that doesn't trip you into the aquifer protection or groundwater management ordinance. But if you have a gas station that has 10 pumps and now you're adding 4 more pumps and another, you know, 20,000 gallons of gasoline being stored, that then triggers this review because that's a change subject to the ordinance or a use that's prohibited or restricted under this.
So, have the folks that are in these zones that have those types of uses have they been notified of this?
No, that'll be the next step is through the public hearing process is making sure that, and that outreach is done. And so what we would do is, you know, reach out to some of those regulated users and make them aware of this and let them come and speak to the
Yeah,
concern of the
like I
hearing.
said, I'm all for the ordinance. I just think that some of these folks are probably not aware that this is even going on, and all of a
Yep.
sudden, they technically have a livelihood, a business, et cetera, in a,
Well, and they can continue the livelihood of the business and the operation, but an expansion of that operation would be subject to review.
yeah, but, you know, it seems as if that would never be the case, that they would have to change from where they are today or whatever, but, you know, things change, economies change. The way you service the public changes. And I could very well see I mean, you go and look at gas stations and when I was a kid, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, and you know, it was full service, it was one little thing, you know. Now it's all self-service, you're driving up, they have a car wash, they have a grill next to it, everything, you know, they sell everything. So it's like, I could see the whole concept of, I mean, maybe it's all electrical by then, or electric cars by then, or, you know, whatever. But I could see it changing significantly, as well as any type of restrictions to the storage tanks or things where it goes to double-lined and contained and what have you, which I thought just changed 10 years ago, you know, so.
But, you know, I think as time goes on, planning board should be reviewing the ordinances, so and usually we hear from people also that something that some of this was written probably like 50 years ago. It probably doesn't really apply, so we got to update it to, you know, really how people feel today, so. I mean, that's, some of the changeability also could be within the ordinance.
All I'm saying is that they should
Yeah.
have their
What-
day in the public as well to voice their
yes.
concerns.
So what, this does restrict and intentionally so certain uses from within the aquifer protection or that could have a potential to contaminate groundwater resources. And so where there is somebody who is within this district but is currently doing something lawfully by right and they're permitted to allow that, to continue that, but what we want to do is discourage expansion of uses that are in conflict with the protection of the underlying groundwater resources. So we want to, you know, protect the fact that people have property rights and have the right to continue doing what they're doing, but we also want to recognize the fact that certain uses like, you know, storage of bulk petroleum product are not uses that we want to encourage within areas where there are groundwaters that are source water, that are protecting the source water. So we've got, you know, wellhead protection areas in the aquifer that we have, you know, wells that are drawing from these. We are discouraging. So that's something for the board to be aware. We are discouraging, you know, uses like gasoline stations and expansion of gas stations in those areas. And we'll certainly, you know, we don't typically reach out to, there are, by statute, when we notify, we have to post public hearing, we don't have to notify each individual property owner who's affected unless it's, lower than a certain percentage of the land area. So in this case, we're not required to notify every impacted property owner. If the board would like, we can make an effort, and clearly, if we know that there are users that have that particular use that could be impacted, but I don't know if the board wants us to notify every property owner within, these impacted areas, every residential and commercial property owner, just the commercial property owners. Folks that don't own an impacted property but live right next door are also impacted by the fact that they're drawing water from the aquifers that are serving these areas. So open to whatever you think is appropriate for notification, but I'd look for some input from the board on how you think we should make sure that impacted property owners are made aware.
I think Gianni has mentioned probably those commercial areas that the livelihood comes from their business there. But there'd be concerns on those individuals.
The only reason that I would balance is that I think that if we directly target reaching out to commercial property owners, and you're going to receive a lot of input from commercial property owners that have a concern that we're restricting what they can do with their property. Whereas if you also are including the residential properties that are abutting, or any impacted property owner or any property owner in town, you're going to receive very different public input. So I think that the average resident may have a concern about wanting to protect their groundwater quality, whereas a business is going to have a concern about making sure that they're preserving the rights for their business to operate. So that's the only thing that gives me pause in in targeting one particular type of user for getting a direct notification. But
No, I see the balance there,
Yeah.
right? All I'm suggesting is that if somebody has an existing use that is now, if they were to rebuild it or change it significantly, it no longer is an allowed use.
if they're
I think you should
expanding
work
it, an
on that
expansion. Okay. Yep.
aspect of it, because I don't think it's fair to go to somebody after the fact and they've had an established business in an area that has one of these services, and then say, hey, you no longer comply, you gotta turn it into some other use,
That wouldn't be the case.
But
It
if
would
their-
only be if they were
their site
expanding
plan
their
had to
use.
change, it would
Yeah.
be the case, right?
If their site plan was changing and if it was an expansion of this use that's currently, like I said, right now, if they're approved and they have a gas station that has so many pumps or such a circumstance, but if they're expanding or making that a more intense use, then that's gonna trigger the groundwater protection district. If they're making any change, it's gonna trigger site plan review. But if it's something that rises to the level of site plan review, but
So if they go from having 4 pumps and they want to have 5 pumps, they wouldn't be able to do that, right?
I'd say no if it's because that's an expansion of a use that's prohibited. But if they had 4 pumps and they were reconfiguring their 4 pumps, then I would not say that that's an expansion that's subject to this. But I think that clarification on that, I can see would be warranted. I would have a concern with saying that if you have a gas station, you can always have a gas station forever and ever, and you can expand that without falling under this. I think that we want to make sure that that those non-compatible uses in a groundwater management or district are not expanded.
So I'll bring up another thing that may happen. I don't know if this is, so say you went to go refinance your property. And you were one of these non-allowed uses.
You're an existing non-conforming, just like any other existing non-conforming use when the appraiser calls and is trying to
So you
determine
think
valuation.
that might affect their valuation or their ability to
No,
obtain
because they're an existing
working capital or
non-conforming,
financing?
they're an existing non-conforming use, so it's a legally existing
They
non-conforming
were
use.
a conforming use when they originally built facility and located there. And then you pass an ordinance, and now their underlying zone doesn't allow for that use any longer.
That would, it's a question we answer on a daily basis. An appraiser calls and asks, is this, yep, they're legally allowed to be there because they were there prior to the passage of the ordinance. Now, if they're going to be expanding or changing, that's different, but that existing use is a legally existing use.
Well, just concerns
Yep.
I'll let the rest of the board
Yeah,
chime in on it, but.
I appreciate, because this is a change. This is intentionally restricting uses. So I want the board to have a dialogue and be comfortable with this, because this is a change. It will impact property owners.
I have a question.
Okay.
Are we going backwards?
Yeah, we're,
You missed your chance.
Scott, I think, probably in fairness, Roger, we'll go through the whole board. and
Yes,
come
yeah,
back to
okay, I
you.
didn't realize that because we had, all right, go ahead.
Al,
I'm all set for now.
okay. Lynn,
No, listening to Giovanni, I think I understand his concerns, and I think they're very valid concerns. I think it's something, though, we can't allow, we have to put some thought into it to address that, but I certainly wouldn't want to see that, just stop this ordinance from going forward.
Yeah, and I like, don't get me wrong, I think it's a much-needed ordinance. I just think there needs to be a little bit of thought put into that.
Absolutely.
For the pre-existing, uses.
okay, Jeff.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree that we should have further thought on pre-existing usages. I would also, in the spirit of transparency, probably everybody that's in these zones probably should receive a targeted notification that this ordinance changing, there's a public comment period and so forth. I think the more communication, the better, so we can get, balanced public input, is definitely kind of the suggestion I would definitely make. But definitely hearing, Johnny discuss the pre-existing businesses and how this ordinance could either force a change of their business or potential devalue their business. I need to do some more kind of
So-
research and understanding of those
So the
concerns.
language in 46811 on the existing nonconforming uses just states that existing nonconforming uses may continue without expanding or changing to another nonconforming use, but must be in compliance with all applicable state, federal requirements and best management practices. So it is stating that expansion is not permitted. So if the board wants to allow expansion to a certain percentage, or if there is some, if you want to make some other exemption for nonconforming uses, it does dilute the intention of the ordinance on protecting groundwater, but would protect some of those rights and concerns of uses, existing nonconforming uses, to be able to expand to some reasonable percentage that the board felt is appropriate.
Notice it's just the word gasoline at the
Yeah,
very end.
that's
Yeah.
a
That's
typo.
something that was gonna
Copy
go
and paste
somewhere
error.
else.
Yeah.
Anything else, Jeff?
No, I'm all set, Mr. Chair.
Deb?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I agree with what John and Jeff are saying, and everybody's really saying. Yeah, I would assume that these businesses that we're speaking about are all up to standards, but it would be good if we could get whatever water samples we have from DES, I guess, in those areas. They must have some sort of there must be some sort of information about water sampling in some of those areas.
Monitoring wells near gas stations,
Or
know,
down the, 10 feet away,
Yeah.
20 feet away, I don't know, but there should be some. I mean, what we could get, because it does move around. It's not like water stays in one spot. It moves around. So if you're, if they're right here, I know you can't see my map, but, so if they're in this area, and we say, okay, or this area, there's gas stations, or even up in here, where can we get some testing that's near there, just to see the results? And to make sure that all of those gas stations are up to standard, which is really, I'm sure DES checks them and corporate checks them, but I would hope that those companies are up to standard. Like John said, they went from, you know, one liner to two liner. Have all of them gone up to standard, all up to two liners? I mean, this is, I don't know, these are, I don't know who holds them accountable or how that part of the industry works, but I think it's information that should be given to us. And I would even like to see surface water included in some of this protection, because if you're spewing chemicals into the air, it goes into the lake near you or a water, and that goes down into the ground. If it's sitting on top of the water and it rains, now it's in the groundwater. So there's all kinds of, I mean, all water should be included. This is a real issue in the state, and we have to hold businesses accountable for, you know, the pollution that they're doing. You don't want to see anybody injured from it, you know, not, you know, lose their business or their income, but if it means a difference of making $100,000 a year and $90,000 because you had to fix something that could be potentially contaminant, I would think, A, the company itself would want to do it, and B, you know, it's just the right thing to do.
So I don't know that we have the authority to, I mean, we can certainly see what sort of monitoring wells are out there and what water quality testing and information DES has, what data they have available. I don't know that we as a municipality have the authority to.
No, but when you're putting this data together and this information, it's good to
Yeah.
have that along with it, so that they know that we're watching. And that's really what it comes down to. If they feel that you're not watching, then they're not, but if they feel like you're watching, they tend to try to do the right thing, I think.
Like the police are spying.
Well, yeah, it's like the officer that sits there, right, and isn't necessarily checking you as you're speeding, but he's making people go, oh, look at my speedometer. I need to slow down and do the right thing. That's kind of what you want to make sure that's happening, because,
Yeah,
I mean, if some of these things are leaking into ground, that's bad.
This is really in the domain of the DES. I mean, we can get information from them, but as far
Yeah.
as enforcement or sampling
Well,
or
I
anything,
guess
that's
knowing what they do,
I mean, that's their responsibility.
knowing what the DES,
I can
does.
certainly find from DES what the permitting and inspection requirements are for if it's, you know, specifically, you know, gas stations, you know, I don't know, but I know that when I'm at the gas pump, you see the sticker that the pump has been, you know, inspected for, you know, weights and measures. I don't know what's the annual inspections on the underground tanks and the containment, or at what point they're required. I
well,
can
I mean,
certainly
it's
do
not
some
just gas
information.
stations. It's
Yeah.
people who are washing cars or just fixing cars. You know, they're taking fluids out of the cars, they're going into these drain containments. You know, are those being inspected as well? I mean, there are a whole series of, I mean, it's even the grocery stores. It's the Hannafords who have these huge, and Shaw's and Market Basket have these huge refrigerators with antifreeze and Freon that get drained out and cleaned, and making sure that all of that containment for it is in the,
I'm not sure
condition of
what
keeping it.
information you're asking me to.
no,
to-
I'm just saying,
yeah.
just to kind of get some information from DES as to what standards do they hold contaminating businesses or businesses that are potentially contaminating? Like, what is their standard, so that we can maybe see some of that stuff, right? And then say, our ordinance doesn't really take this into consideration, and that could be added to it. Do
Okay.
you know what I'm trying to say?
I
Not
think some
really,
specificity
but
of
we can connect after.
No,
And
I don't want you to
yeah,
work for you. I
well,
mean, I'll call them, I don't care.
Because this ordinance this is the model from DES. So this is what DES is saying is the model ordinance for communities
pretty
to,
much what we
Yeah.
are allowed to do.
yeah.
Right, then I would like to consider some ordinances to protect surface water as well. Because
Yes.
surface water affects groundwater,
Yep.
and we really need to,
It's probably what we should take, well, it's a concern, but, you know, keep it separate from this.
no, but we should have something too to be looking at, making sure that that's up to date.
And you mentioned, I think, Deb, was it someone to come speak to the planning board?
Oh, yeah, there are a few people that I gave the information to Colleen.
Colleen has, okay.
It seems like every other meeting that, I go to like 3 water meetings. Matter of fact, there's one tomorrow night, and then there's one Friday, and then there's one Monday. I go to all these different water meetings, and there is just constant change and constant updating, and every time we change, it becomes a little bit more concerning, and a little bit more concerning, and it just seems like every single time, it's turning into like one of those nightmares you can't wake up from. It's not good. It just really isn't. And even the cancer studies, hopefully we'll have that data within a month to see where we have some hot
That'll be
spots.
on the state's website or our website?
Yes, I'll be
or-
posting the video I'll give it to the town. I give it to Kirby and to Lisa Drabick, and they've been posting the videos of the meetings, because now they put them on YouTube,
Yeah.
which was something they weren't doing, but now they are doing. Kind of pushed for getting more people involved, people calling in, going to these meetings, and if they can't go, writing letters, because we really, really need to get more and more data, especially on the health side. If you've been here for so long, and you've got cancer, it's all different types of cancers. The sheet keeps getting longer. Every time I go to a meeting, it's like 3 more things were added. It's like, oh, I thought I understood this. No, I don't. And a lot of it, has to do with allowing businesses who could be potentially contaminating to continue a bad habit. And I say that, for example, with St. Cobain, they asked them to put in a system in July. They never did. They should have been shut down. They allowed them to continue. And it's still, that sort of thing is still going on, and it's scary. And so if they do contaminate in the air, again, that goes on groundwater, and winds can take it, and that, surface water, excuse me, which can then go into groundwater, which is all water we're drinking. It's really scary
Yes.
stuff.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to take up the whole
No,
meeting.
Ted's patiently waiting there, so.
Well,
For
the
sure,
the
Ted.
thing is you can't be patient when you're talking about people's lives, and you're talking about kids and pregnant moms drinking water that could be causing all kinds of issues. You can't take your time. That's the,
Okay, Ted?
sorry.
So if I'm reading this correctly, it's primarily affecting gas stations, correct?
So the prohibited uses in the groundwater protection district, solid waste landfill, outdoor storage of road salts and other de-icing chemicals in bulk, development or operation of a junkyard, development or operation of a snow dump, wastewater septic lagoon, petroleum bulk plant or terminal, and gasoline stations. So those are the prohibited uses.
Probably our primary ones would be within town, would be gas
Gas
stations.
station would be the primary concern in
So
town.
I'm seeing this as primarily affecting the exit 5 area for anything that could potentially expand would be in that area.
Yep.
But,
Goes into Route 102 as well, and the
well,
entire
not
airport-
much on 102, really.
The entire
because
airport area too,
Not much on 102 is on here.
the entire airport area.
Well, I'll get to that. So, and also within our ordinance here, you're also saying that anything within the airport district is not,
Airport district is exempt.
right, is exempt. So I'd like to see also on the map, a circle or a ring of what's considered the airport
Well,
district.
The airport
Because you
district,
have-
so it's not, so we took, so where there would have been yellow under airport district, we took it off. So the airport aeronautical operations area there's no yellow shown in that area. That
Okay.
airport district is already exempt from.
So I'll have some issues with that because FW Webb has giant tanks for gasoline for their trucks. And say if they want to expand and have more tanks for their trucks, that would be a big, major problem for them then.
They wouldn't be able to, so an expansion would not be permitted. They would need to apply for a variance, or they can continue with, but if they are doing bulk storage, if petroleum bulk plant or terminal, if they meet that definition, then that's not permitted in the aquifer protection.
What is that bulk definition?
A petroleum bulk plant or terminal is a portion of a property where petroleum products are received by tank, vessel, pipeline, tank car, tank vehicle, are stored or blended in bulk for the purpose of distributing. So
Because is it a volume number?
there's not a volume number attached to it in the state's model ordinance.
That's a little vague.
Yeah.
Because I know they have, I think, what is it? At least 5 to 10 tanks up at FWM. So if they wanted to expand more than what they have, that would be a major problem for them.
They wouldn't be able to do that without a variance.
Right.
Because the intent is not to have expansion of those uses that conflict with the protection of the groundwater district. So this again is a significant change for the board to consider, that you're balancing groundwater protection and restricting those uses that the state DES has identified as being the major concerns of contamination to drinking water supplies. So it impacts property owners.
I think for that area up by the airport, that needs to be expanded out more for allowance.
So the reason that the airport itself is exempt is because the advice of town attorney that the intermunicipal agreement that already applies to the airport itself relating to aeronautical uses, it's exempt. So if we already are not regulating and cannot regulate the de-icing chemicals, jet fuel storage, other things on the airport, those aeronautical uses. But I guess, where's the line and what's the justification of why would we leave the industrial district out, or particular properties, or that really gets to I can state that the reason that the airport is exempt is because there's an existing intermunicipal agreement that exempts them from this regulation anyways. If we start to go down a line of this district applies, except we're not going to apply it to the Pettingill Road area, there's a real, what's the legal basis, what's the scientific basis behind exempting that particular area of an aquifer or wellhead protection from being regulated. So I would have a concern about, I would rather not adopt the ordinance at all than to kind of pick and choose and say, what's the area, because there needs to be something legally defensible why I would say that the Pettingill Road area is not subject to regulation, but Route 102 is. We'd be in court in a heartbeat with a lawsuit from property owners.
I guess then my last comment would be is the little bit of yellow area where is kind of near the executive. Are there any streams there or anything? I don't remember there being any streams up there. I'm wondering, why is that yellow?
It's not necessarily streams. This is talking about aquifers. So these are underground streams, basically, is an aquifer. So these stratified drift aquifers this is bedrock hydrology. So it's not necessarily surface water. We're talking bedrock.
Well said. Okay, get
No,
Jerry first, and then Jake,
Well, I
and then you,
think
Deb.
actually,
Yep.
My questions are quick.
Okay,
I was looking more towards the smaller gas stations, and you mentioned expansion of pumps. But isn't it really the tank size or how many tanks you have? I mean, if you have a tank can supply 4 pumps, maybe you only have 2 and you put 4 on it, later on. It isn't gonna change the problem with groundwater. It's the tank in the ground.
The language from the model just states without expanding or changing. I mean, to that concern, if the board wants to better define what is an expansion, if expansion is storage or expansion is intensity,
Okay.
that's can be
And
clarified.
the second, does that eliminate, so you want to change your tank to an upgraded one? Would you be able to do that if it's the same size?
That's an in-kind change, so that's not.
Okay. See, I
But,
told you
but
quick.
clarification, I think making
long as we're
clear
on
that
turkeys,
what I interpret that as an in-kind change, I think to that point, making sure that that's written into here, that an in-kind, 10,000 gallons to 10,000 gallons,
Yes.
that's not a change, that's in-kind.
But if you want to go from 10,000 gallons to 20,000 gallons.
That's
Okay.
expansion, and that's in your,
so what
Even if you don't
conversation
change the number
going
of
on
pumps.
here?
even if you don't change the number of pumps.
Well, and what Ted brings to light is probably really affects a lot of these other areas, not just the retail gas stations, but some of these industrial users that have diesel tanks and things like that. But I want to reiterate that I see the importance in a groundwater ordinance. So why couldn't you do something for the expediency of getting this thing in place that you exempt any of the existing grandfathered uses from the ordinance? So if they are pre-existing and they have to go in and they have to make an expansion or they have to do something, you could exempt them from it. Because, you know, it's kind of like they didn't know what they were getting into from the beginning because this kind of got brought up later on, right? But going forward, you can stop everything, which is the goal here, right? To say, let's be conservative in these areas and let's not further complicate our water situation. So I don't know if you could do that. And, you know, it's always the big companies like the airport and thing that wind up getting exempt from these areas. But it's the little guy that probably doesn't have the money to back them in a legal, you know, and it's just, I don't agree with that. Anyhow, so that might be a possible
Food for
solution.
thought.
Yeah, I can run that by the town attorneys and see. I think it makes it less, it's not as strong of an ordinance because but I get the point that if we're
But-
trying to balance,
But they're
then-
already there. They're
Yeah.
already working. If they had to have a, you know, I don't think any of these people are coming in with major changes, but they might have a change. But you can still apply this on the rest of the town, or the remaining land that's not developed.
Yep, I can work with the town attorney and see if language like that would be, you know, acceptable to the board and to the attorney.
Yeah, we can find out anyway. I got Jake, Deb, and I'll come to Jason after that, so.
Couple things. I have to agree. I didn't even think of any of the stuff Ted was talking about with industrial. I'm thinking of Chuck at BP and Dave at DS&S Sunoco. You know, what's this gonna do to them, people who have been in town as long as I have, you know? They have to change the size of their tank by 5,000 gallons for God knows what reason. We're gonna tell them they can't, you know? Trucking's a whole lot more expensive now. That extra 5,000 gallons means he can wait another week to bring in more gas, and we're gonna tell him no, and now he's paying for more trucks, so on and so forth, right? So, to his point, I definitely think of the existing places should have a little bit of a different set of rules, if you will. On the 4.6.8.9 prohibited uses, when I read that, it says the development or operation of gas stations. That to me says this goes into place, it's development or operation. So is or operation all these operating gas stations?
No, it's because they are, existing non-conforming uses are not subject to this.
Okay. So anything that's already there, you know, because even with like petroleum bulk plants, you know, there's 2 apple orchards that are inside of these. I bet you both of them have some sort of holding station of their fuels for their daily operation, you know? How's that going to affect them? It looks like Max is in it, and I think Merrill Farm is up top in the north end of town.
I think I can reach out to DES for better definitions from them on the bulk plant or terminal, because I believe that this is intended to be larger quantities of fuel. We're talking hundreds of thousands of, you know, gallons versus.
Even then, you know, those orchards and stuff like that might have a 250-gallon gas tank.
Well,
it
that's
still
where
gets
I'm saying
delivered.
that
It's brought in by a truck. You know?
I don't
Yeah.
believe that the language that DES has written here
Is
is
trying to
intended
do
to
that.
regulate something that's a 5,000 gallon tank
Yeah,
or a.
so I think maybe having a number on that.
Yep.
But again, the biggest thing is, you know, I wasn't even thinking of FW Webb. I'm thinking of guys like Chuck and Dave who have been in town for 30 years. How's this gonna negatively impact the business that's been here and is existing if they do for some reason have to, you know, BP has 2 diesel pumps. What if they wanna go to 3 and take away 1 gas pump and put in another diesel pump. They're still gonna need a bigger diesel tank. Now they can't do it, you know? So I definitely think there's gotta be a little bit more there to it. I agree with the whole thing, but we just need a little bit more there for people who are already there.
It's the details, because I
Yeah.
think this was carefully
Yeah,
threaded
oh,
by
yeah.
DES anyway.
Yeah,
so.
yep. And how would that affect like a, I would assume it would still be able to go in, but, you know, you look at the top exit 5, there's supposed to be a gas station going in up there that's in this protection district. I would assume, because that's already
Yeah.
a plan that's been signed, they wouldn't have any issues, right?
That lot is actually outside of this.
Is it?
I don't think it's in it.
Yeah, it's just on
Outside.
it's just on the left of that.
Yep.
No, it's close
On the
then.
left hand of the street. Yeah.
It's skating in.
Yeah.
It's all of like Liberty and that Liberty Drive area.
Yeah,
Other than that, nothing else is really in it.
okay.
Looks like it's basically
Okay, Deb,
What I would like you to do, Colleen, is to, when you speak to the town attorney, look at what happened at Portsmouth and what Portsmouth is doing. They actually sued the airport, and they won, because the airport contaminated a ton of property over there. And so I don't see why we have to exempt the airport. I really don't.
I don't know the circumstances, but there's the longstanding intermunicipal agreement that the town has signed with the city of
I
Manchester.
just would like him to
so
look,
we'll-
compare
Yep.
the difference between what we have
Yep.
and what Portsmouth did, because I don't think that the airport should be excluded.
No, Deb, the big difference is the airport out there in Portsmouth is a military airport.
Okay,
It's
but
a
they
big
still
difference.
de-icing, and de-icing is a toxin.
Well, there
It's
was
a-
also
it's a
many other
poison.
chemicals that were used over there,
But
not
there's-
just that.
And we do the fire retardants over there at the airport, which is also a toxin. So the airport is a huge contaminator of our groundwater. And they should be held to certain rules. Just because they're an airport should not exclude them
I
from
was trying to
anything.
say a difference between airport and military.
But what they did is, what I'm saying is how they got around
yeah, because I
it.
think
So
there's
I
a
should be
big
clear that the
difference.
airport is still subject to, they are subject to DES regulations and best
No,
management
I
practices.
know, but I'm saying
and
they
other-
shouldn't be
but they're
exempt from our.
local zoning. That's the intermunicipal agreement exempts them from local zoning.
Yeah, I don't know what Portsmouth has for any intermunicipal agreement with.
But I just-
It would be really with the federal government, 'cause they,
Well, I just think that we should look and see what we could do there. There could be some leeway, and I agree with what John is saying, and Jake, I get something in my eye, that we really have to be careful with what we're doing here. But I do agree that these businesses all should be notified, and residents, so that they can come in and give their own opinion. I think that's the next step in doing this. And including something for the surface waters.
Jason,
just real quick, would it be possible to do something like, if, maybe as a happy medium, if set like a limit on an existing, so if it expands more than X percent, like the volume of a tank expands more than X percent, or like a change of ownership or something like that, then that triggers this?
I'll need to consult with DES and with the town attorney and see, I hear what the board is asking, and I don't have an answer, but I'll talk with DES and the town attorney and see if we can come up with something that can be supported and justifiable and is legally defensible, and still, serves the intent of protecting groundwater. So I'm hearing the direction that you guys are providing, and I could do some research and get back to you on that.
I think that this is a critical ordinance, I really do. But by the same token, I don't want to exempt an FW Web, who has millions of dollars and probably could do this, or kill a local
Yeah.
business that is, just trying to make
We-
it, so.
We want to be, and this is why you guys get paid the big bucks to balance and make these tough decisions on
gotta thread that
balancing
needle
economic
through.
development and growth and environmental and natural resources, and it's, so this is, and I'm very glad that this is prompting this discussion, because I have had concerns that said, oh, okay, yep, we're good, and so this is the type of discussion that is appreciated to make sure that these concerns are being vetted, so.
I've got to update my address with you because I'm not getting those checks.
Talk to finance, you know.
You're excited with the
Your
finance
next
department?
year on the board, we will double your salary. What's 2 times 0? So-
Get another
They have
zero.
your address, they don't miss the tax bill.
Yeah, I sure get those, yeah.
Yeah, 'cause, the thing with this, as we get into the details, we're finding more and more, which is good. It's the way it should go.
Yeah.
But I think there's definitely further research and further discussion to go on this before it's anywhere near, I think, our satisfaction to present to the public.
I did have one more comment.
Turkeys?
You know, the question was brought up of what happens to the oil in a small shop and everything. And when you drain out oil now, there's 2 things that happen. During the summer, a guy with a big truck comes over and buys it from you. But in the wintertime, everybody has the waste oil burners to heat the shop. So that takes care of the majority of the oil problem. And the same thing happens with when you drain out antifreeze or anything like that. It goes into another bucket and another guy comes by. And a third guy comes by and picks up all your metal trash for nothing. So,
Yeah, no, he just reminded me, the other thing to look at is the, I think Kip Plummer was telling me that just Danny Hicks and Max, right, Sunnycrest and Max, have the platforms for mixing the chemicals. And so if that expands,
Pesticides.
pesticides, yes.
Okay, I'll have to look and
Pesticides need to
see.
be added to that.
And it could be agricultural uses,
Yeah.
some sort of exemption for agricultural uses might be the,
as your oil
We need
racks
to
up
look,
on
we
the
need to add
plastic.
that just because of the mixing of the chemicals and the spraying. That's
Yeah, because in agriculture,
important.
there are a lot of chemicals, they're not all the nicest stuff.
all right, well, this is
We don't want to touch it.
good discussion, so I appreciate the input, and I'll take what I've heard this evening and do some more research on some of these items and talk with the attorney and DES and come back.
We doing this again anyway. Did
Yep.
you have anything to add at all, Marge? You're okay. We'll listen to you. You probably had enough
Yeah.
listening to us.
Oh, it's all good stuff. Marge Bedoy, Conservation Commission. I do think it's very important to notify anybody that's affected by this, but if we approach it in an education manner, that, look, you're in this sensitive area, you have the opportunity to protect water, here's what you can do, here's what you can avoid doing, and, you know, do it in a way that you're asking for their help and not saying,
Yes.
you can't do this, you can't do that, because that's just going to annoy folks.
excellent.
Yeah.
And then your question about surface water testing. A couple years back, we paid beaucoup bucks to do extensive surface water testing. And through that, the Conservation Commission and staff came up with a list of recommendations of what we can do to help protect the water. And this ordinance, I believe,
Should
was
have it
part of that
attached.
recommendation. So there is a plan. The test, you know, we are aware of the condition of surface water and groundwater and making efforts to protect it.
Right, I'm just thinking it should go with it somehow or another, just so it make it front of mind.
Yeah. And then for your pre-existing folks, is there a way that we could write in a component that would be like a variance or a waiver so that maybe we address these on an individual basis instead of having to put blanket approval for, you know, everybody, when it would be good to look at the merits of each individual
Yeah,
situation?
I think it's really going to be an individual thing.
That's what we do for all our other ordinances.
Right,
and-
and that's what I was trying to suggest, is something that either was a variance or grant, you know, I mean, they're pre-existing, maybe they're exempt from it. Or at least you get the groundwater ordinance in place
Right,
for the rest of the town,
yeah,
which I think is important.
yeah. So that's my comments.
Oh, well, thank you. And feel free to work with Colleen, you know.
Yeah.
I'm sure you do, so. Okay. Next, we have just updates.
Yep, so relating to commercial kennels, as I've been reviewing other communities and trying to make sense of what makes sense for the town, we're still working on it. So we don't have draft language for you because if you think that chickens and poultry are complicated, then the
Wait till you get
commercial
to
kennels
dogs and
versus
cats.
doggy daycare versus, so we will be coming, we're still working on that language and looking at some best approaches and what other communities have done and what'll work best for Londonderry. So Nick and I will be working on that. We'll come to you with something in the near future. And as an update on the sign ordinance, so our RFP resulted in one proposal being submitted to the tune of about $64,000 to update the sign ordinance, which was way beyond what we would have anticipated as a reasonable scope of work. And being that we only had one response, we're going to go back to the drawing board and figure out how to approach that. So we want to look at and update signage, but we're going to sort of balance, these different zoning updates and certainly try to do something in a much more fiscally constrained measure than 3 times my management services annual budget being spent on sign ordinance. So we'll be back to the drawing board on this and how we'll approach that. So
Yeah, I think what we're doing now is complex. Signage is even much more so.
yeah.
It's,
So.
Maybe the scope of work for that needs to be changed?
No, I think that in some of the input that we got from local consultants is that they're just really busy right now and don't have the time to take on a project. And so we had a time frame built in there that would be a project starting this spring, taking about 6 months. And I think that most folks are just looking and just didn't have the bandwidth to take something like that on. So it could be that if we move and keep working on what we're currently working on, and by the time we're ready to really move on to signage, maybe we'll repost the RFP and see if we get some additional interest or if we can make some tweaks and reduce the scope, make clear, what's the consultant's responsibility versus, maybe reducing the number of meetings, other things. So we'll
Maybe
try
it's
to
also a
revisit.
factor that rate of hourly rates have gone up.
Yeah, it's, I think, across industries and across, no matter, people are shorthanded everywhere, apparently even consultants. So it's hard
Especially
to find good
for,
help and it's hard to get
engineers.
projects done. So.
Okay. Anything else? I just want to mention that our March 2nd meeting, we need to vote for election of officers. That's for chair, vice chair, secretary, and assistant secretary. Start the campaigning and also, also we need to have 2 members on the CIP committee. And then also there is a liaison with the Heritage Commission. That falls to me because you have to be a member of the Heritage Commission. And only 1 member of the planning board can be on the Heritage Commission by statute. Anything else? If not, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn, Mr. Chairman.
Motion by Al, second by Jeff. I heard it from down there, anyway. All those in favor of adjournment signify by saying aye.
Aye.